Well, I have a special guest with us. We have Samuel Smadja. He is a messianic believer. He lives in Israel. He is the director of TBN in Israel, but he's also the president of Sarel Tours. And so when we take tours to Israel, to the Holy Land, it is Sammy's group that stages the land tours for us and does such a great job. Interesting background about Sammy. His father was a pastor of a messianic congregation in Jerusalem, and since he went to heaven, passed away, Sammy now is the leader of that congregation. I've had the privilege of speaking to that group. But Sammy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Great honor. Thank you very much.
Here's what I want to ask you today. Israel is in a very unique situation. Other countries have usually, we have friendly neighbors around us. You've been attacked by your neighbors time and time again since you came into the land officially in 1948, 1967, etc., on and on and on. Tell us about the uniqueness of living in that kind of a neighborhood.
First of all, there's no doubt that we live in the wrong neighborhood. Let's put it this way. It's a tough neighborhood, and our neighbor don't like us, and I don't think they don't like us because who we are. When we speak about Israel and when we think about Israel, we have to speak about the plan of salvation for humanity. God has chosen people. God chose a person by the name of Abraham. He chose a people. He took a people out of Egypt, not because they were perfect, not because they were impressive. If I was God, I would probably choose the Egyptian. But he chose the Jewish people. He made them a people. He gave them the law. He gave them the prophet. Through them, he gave them the Messiah. So we're talking about a group of people that God has chose to introduce the plan of salvation to mankind. First of all, to show men and women that they're sinner, to talk about the holiness of God. And I believe what we see today, we see the devil. I believe that we're living in the end time. I think that the devil just opened the gates of hell and unleashing any spirit of death against the people of Israel in order to cut this plan of salvation. Skip, we all talk about the end time. We all believe that we're getting closer to the end time. The return of the Jewish people shows to the land, shows us that we are in the end time because it's a fulfillment of probably the biggest prophecy. I mean, let's be honest, if people are watching us or hearing us and the only proof that they have that the Bible is true, physical proof, yes, they had the spiritual experience, yes, they believe in Yeshua, in Jesus because he touched their heart, he revealed himself to them, but the only physical true evidence is the return of the Jewish people. The return of the Jewish people is not a result of a Zionistic movement. Yes, there's no doubt that in Europe, in the beginning of the 19th century and the 20th century, the Jews were wanting to come to Israel. The Holocaust expedite everything, but we know it was a miracle of God. So now we have people around us that, Skip, it's a demonic what's going on. It's not a normal war. When a group of people goes into a small village, a small town, and kill children, ladies, I understand you kill a soldier. We're in a war and so on, but just killing for the sake of killing, and as the whole world know, we lost approximately 1,500 people. And when you look at the picture, it's unbelievable. It's people that lost the image of God. So for me, it shows me that it's a spiritual warfare. It's a demonic thing. It's not just a fight between two countries.
Yeah. Sammy, let me drill down a little bit on that. There's a lot of different groups around you that are hostile. Everybody knows the name Hamas now. If they didn't know it 2 weeks ago, they now know it. But that's just one group. And there are others. There's the PLO, Fatah, there's Hezbollah, and many others. Can you just tell us about who these groups are?
I have to be very, very, very almost careful because Hamas is a group that started maybe 20 years ago. They're Palestinian who took a very, very extreme side of Islam, who are very influenced by Al Qaeda and by the Iranian, by the Shiites mentality, and they put on their flag just to kick us out from here. And if we don't want to leave nicely and go back to the, sorry to say, to the gas chambers in Europe, in their mind, they'll kill us. It's not a group that you can sit around at a table
and
and
negotiate.
discuss and negotiate and all that, because they are driven by a demonic power. It's beyond, Now you have the Palestinian Authority, who once was called the PLO, and Israel, if people remember, I'm sure people remember the Oslo Accord. Israel and the Palestinian Authority came into an agreement into A zone, B zone, and C zone in the West Bank, and they run their own life. But sad to say, I think now it's 15 years ago, there was election in the West Bank. Israel asked the American not to push an election in Gaza, but we were a bit pushed to give them an election in Gaza. And the Palestinian Authority lost in the election 15 years ago, and there was never another election. So once the Hamas came in, and that's what Israel warned the world when the world was pushing so much for election, for a democracy, it was the last democracy. And they came in, and since then there was never another election, and since then there was no negotiation. And if you also remember, Israel decided to leave the Gaza Strip. We left them homes, we left them beautiful homes, we left everything, and we went out. If there were people, it reminds me the words of Golda Meir, our prime minister, and she says the problem with them is that they hate us more than they love their children. If they would love their children more than they hate us, we would be in a much better place. So everything is driven by hate.
I want to pivot just a minute and talk a little bit about the congregation that you are associated with. Your father established, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the first messianic congregation,
the first independent messianic congregation
in the land of Israel. And
there were different churches at that time. The Baptists were here, the Lutherans were here, and so on. But Israeli local congregation led by Israelis with the name of messianic was the first one.
Talk a little bit about this. It's difficult to live in Israel with the neighborhood you live in, but it's even more difficult to live in Israel as a messianic believer. Tell us a little bit about that dynamic.
Today, it's not as much as difficult as it was 20 or 30 years ago. You have to understand, when my parents immigrated to Israel, my father lost his father at the Holocaust. My grandfather died in Auschwitz, never came back. And when they came here and they presented Yeshua as the Messiah for the Jewish people, it was like presenting Christianity. And my father immediately understood that he should not bring quote-unquote Christianity, because the Jewish people related Christ, Yeshua, with Christianity. So my father understood that he needed to bring a Jewish Messiah to the Jewish people. And that's why he started with another brother who became a believer, also a friend, also in Africa. My father came from North Africa. He came from Burkina Faso. He was a French legionnaire, met Messiah. And both of them understood that they need to start something where Jews can feel at home, where the gospel won't be as strange. We know that the gospel is hard enough with the cross and the deity of the Messiah and all the obstacles the Jews have, but we didn't want to come under the church. So Skip, at that time, the Jewish people in Israel, our people Israel, saw Christianity as the reason or the responsible of the Holocaust. So there was a big opposition for that thing. Today, and at that time, you have to understand that in the whole country there were maybe 20 Jewish believers, Jews that
Mm.
believe in Yeshua as Messiah. Today, I think we're like 30,000, 35,000.
Wow.
So people hear about us. So life is easier. Definitely, the message is still very hard for the Jewish people. Believing in Yeshua, believing in Jesus, is a very hard. The gospel of the New Testament is a very hard gospel for the Jew, because John chapter 1, the first 13 verses, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the whole deity, proclaiming that the Messiah is a divine person. It's a very hard thing for the Jewish people. The whole concept, although it's known in the Old Testament, but the whole concept of a suffering Messiah is also very hard for the Jewish people. Let's be honest, it was very hard for the disciple. The disciple could not see a suffering Messiah. We see when Yeshua prophesied that he's going to go up to Jerusalem and he's going to suffer and die. We don't see the disciple rejoicing. Oh, great, we're going to have an atonement for our sin. Even John, and think about it, Skip. Even John the Baptist, when he was in the dungeon, and he who pointed on Yeshua and said, "This is the Lamb of God," he had the most revelation of all of them. When he was in the dungeon, when he was in the jail, he called his disciple and he said, go to my cousin and tell him, are you the one, or should we wait for another? Because in his mind, Yeshua should come to Jerusalem, take his place, and release him
Yeah.
from prison.
Yeah.
He could not
Set up a kingdom.
understand. Yeah, set up his kingdom and release me.
Mm.
So this, we take sometimes things for granted, but with the Jewish people, when we present the Messiah, we have many challenges. Another thing is the whole idea of salvation by grace. You try to present the Messiah and a system of grace, which, let's be honest, the Old Testament is a totally different system. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. The New Testament tells you do good, you get good. You do bad, you get good. That's grace. Think about it. It's against the Jewish mindset.
Yeah.
And now presenting to somebody who believes that there are 613 commandments, and you climb a ladder of righteousness in order to get to God, suddenly you tell him, listen, you don't need to do anything to be saved. God himself came down. It's, for a Jewish ear, it's heresy.
Back to the Palestinian issue. Before the British Mandate, before the UN Declaration, Arabs, correct me if I'm wrong, but Arabs did not identify as being Palestinian. That is more of a recent invention, even though it was a name given by Hadrian for the area, and harkens back to that. Who are the Palestinians today?
Let's go back. Before the establishment of the State of Israel, the Palestinians were a group of Jordanian Arabs who lived here in the neighborhood. Some of them went under Jordan. Some of them we inherited, but we inherited much more after 1967. There was never a state of Palestine. There was never a prime minister of Palestine. There was never a president of Palestine. The state of Palestine never existed as a state.
Mm.
And as you said, the British called the place Palestine from the Philistines, the biblical name of the Philistines in the Bible. They just say, okay, they're not Jews, so they must be the Philistines, and they call them Palestinians. But it was never a recognized nation. After 67, Israel took over the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So in a way, we inherited a big amount, and they just do more kids than us, and they grew and grew and grew. And there's no doubt that we have a huge problem. It's a small land, and we cannot, and we have two nations. or two kind of people. We have the Jews and we have the Palestinian. So we need to find a solution, but definitely not like they want a solution. Hezbollah, his only solution is that we leave and they stay, and that's their solution. And we better, according to them, we better learn how to swim, or we should drown in the sea.
Yeah. It's been always interesting to me that whenever a two-state solution was offered, whether it was by a different president here or a previous leader, that there was never has been negotiation on the Palestinian side, and they want the land completely eradicated of any Jewish influence whatsoever. These are radical ideologies.
Let's be honest. Ehud Barak, who was one of our prime minister, was a very decorated chief of staff. He offered them 93% of the territories, and they said no. The issue is not land. The issue is Jerusalem. And it brings us to the prophecy of Yeshua, when he said Jerusalem, it will be a very heavy city, heavy stone to lift.
A heavy stone.
A heavy stone. And the issue, Skip, is Jerusalem. That's where Yeshua was crucified. That's where Abraham brought Isaac to be slaughtered, and God provided a ram. And by the way, a ram and not a lamb. And that's why I say it's a spiritual fight, a spiritual war against the plan of God, because it all brings you to a very small real estate. It's a small neighborhood in Albuquerque, It's small.
Right,
it's a very tiny city, but I don't believe that there'll be a peace in the Middle East till the Prince of Peace comes, because it is.
Sammy, when it comes to Israel saying we have the right to this land, it seems to me it goes along 4 lines of truth. First of all, God made promises specifically to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, etc. But number 2, the Jewish people historically settled in that land under Joshua. There's archaeological proof that there's Jewish settlements throughout that go way back. Number 3, the international community recognized the state of Israel and gave them political sovereignty. And then number 4, every time the neighbors disagreed and attacked them, the territory was taken in defensive wars. Are there any other lines of proof or of?
I think we have a deed to the land. The Palestinians arrived here 200 years ago, and in very small numbers. 100 years ago, the number grew. But we have a deed. You're holding your Bible on the table. That's our deed. And with the Bible, we have archaeology that prove that David was here, that Solomon's were here, that the first temple was here, the second temple was here. It's not that we just arrived 75 years ago. We have 3,000 years of history in Jerusalem. It's not that the temple, even the mosque that they claim, it's not a Palestinian mosque, on the Temple Mount. It's not a Palestinian mosque. So to come and to say that we came out of nowhere and we kicked them out and so on, it's very far away from the truth, And and wherever you go in Israel, you can touch and prove that the Jewish people were there. You go to Bethel, you go to Shiloh, you go to Jerusalem, you go to Bethlehem, you go to Hebron. Wherever you go, Bet Shemesh, you can, and more than anybody. You lead tours in the country, and you walk with your Bible open, and you prove your people, you show your people that this book is not a Sunday school story, is really a deed to the land. And by the way, what the international, we have to be careful with now your point number 3. Because point number three says that the international community agreed that we have the right. But Skip, one day the international community will think that we don't have the right.
That's right.
So we have to be super careful with number three. We have a deed that is beyond the United Nations. We have a deed that is beyond mankind understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And we, as you say, we're in a very, very delicate time. And I believe that in the next 2 weeks, people will open their screens at home and will see horrible pictures from Israel, because Israel is entering into a very, very tough fight. And it's going to be a very bloody fight, but we don't have a choice. It's a fight of defense. It's not a fight. The whole world is not waiting that Israel is going to go and attack the Palestinian Authority. We are waiting for Israel to go and to defend us when they go into Gaza. That's a big, big difference of mindset. We're not there to attack the Palestinians. We're there to go and take the 220 people that they kidnapped. We are there to disarm them from all those missiles that they shoot. In the last 2 weeks, they shot over 5,000 missiles. I think even close to 7,000. It's unheard of.
Yeah.
Imagine if somebody would shoot on California. Not 5,000.
Yeah.
20 missiles.
Right.
Exactly. So the numbers are so. I see the news, and we have to understand that Israel is not going to attack the Palestinians. Israel is going in to defend.
Yeah.
I don't know too many
attack on Israel.
I don't know too many. I didn't see Putin sending flyers from the helicopter to tell people in Kiev to evacuate because he's going to bomb. Israel is the only army that does it. Let's be honest. Yeah. But again, because Israel is a tool, an instrument in the hands of God, we will see a lot of criticism. And I have to say, the only friends that Israel has is America and the church around the world. So I hope when the church sees those pictures, we are not bloodthirsty. People have to understand that when they stand with Israel, they're standing with the plan of God. And we know that Israel makes mistakes. 2 weeks ago, Saturday morning was a huge mistake. Every Israeli on the street. This morning, I spoke to the brother of the chief of staff. He's a friend of mine. And he says, Shmulik is my Hebrew name. Samuel, we have so many questions. How this thing happened? How this thing happened? We're a startup nation. We have all this equipment. We have this fancy fence, very fancy fence, and they surprised us. It's embarrassing to say, but
well, now you're in a very delicate time and situation, as you mentioned. Let me get you to think about after the war, after this becomes a success to eradicate Hamas. Palestinian children have been and are being taught to hate and to kill Jewish people. I've seen the videos. I've heard their words. How is Israel going to be able to withstand that kind of generational hatred?
I'll tell you, we can take their weapon, we can take their missiles, but we cannot take the hatred. Skip, and I'll tell you why. There's no doubt that you love Israel. Did you ever ask yourself why you love Israel? I believe that your love to Israel is a supernatural love. You didn't just get up in the morning and you decided to love Israel. It's a supernatural love that God implanted into your heart. I believe that the hatred is a supernatural hate that the devil implanted in their heart. And I'm sure when your neighbor asks you, Skip, how come you love these Jewish people so much and they did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, nobody will convince you not to love us because it's a love that God implanted in you. So it has to be a miracle from God to erase the supernatural hatred. So we can take the weapon, we can take the missiles, but in 10 years, I think we'll be standing in front of the same war. You understand? It's a supernatural thing. You cannot erase the hatred, And now, with what Israel did in Gaza the last 2 weeks, the hatred just went higher and higher, and they hate all over the world. Look, you saw the demonstration in your country, okay? If you stop one of the people and you say, why do you hate the Israelis so much? Did you ever meet an Israeli? I was in Indonesia, and I met a lady, and she, it's a Muslim country, and she had a Palestinian flag on her coat. And I asked her, man, I see you have a Palestinian flag. I say, yeah. I say, you support the Palestinian cause? She said, yeah, definitely. I said, so I guess you don't really like the Israeli. She said, no, I don't. And she said she hates the Israeli and so on and so on. I said, tell me, by the way, did you ever meet a Jew? She said, no. Did you ever meet an Israeli? She said, no. Did you ever discuss this thing? She said, no. And it dawned on me. It's a supernatural hate. They cannot even explain why they hate us.
Sammy, you lead a tour company, and
Yes.
Tourism has been halted the last few weeks
Yes.
dramatically. And I know it's impossible to make predictions. We have a tour slated for May. We're still encouraging people to sign up, and we believe we know a little bit about Israeli wars, and that you don't dawdle, and that you do things quickly, and you achieve the objective. So, God willing, we hope to be there in May. Any words about that?
The war, if it's the war on Gaza, I believe that once Israel will be in, they'll disarm them within 2 to 3 weeks. Israel won't leave Gaza so quickly, but that won't affect life in Israel. We'll be more safer than we were before, which means after Israel enter into Gaza and take all the weapon and all the rocket launcher and all that, Israel will be a much safer place than anything. The only debate and the only thing is what happens if Hezbollah gets into the picture and Iran and also will get into the picture, and America and Israel will think, oh, that's maybe a great opportunity to take care of Iran. So that might be a bigger scenario, but I think we'll be smarter in 2 weeks.
Okay. What can we do going forward as American believers to stand with Israel?
I think, first of all, to pray. We're commanded to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, I think now more than ever. And we need to pray for the salvation of Israel, that this time of hardship, that the people of Israel understand that till today Israel was counting on the Israeli IDF. And I'm sure and I guarantee you that the IDF will do a tremendous job once they're there. But the surprise we had 2 weeks ago, I think made people to be a bit confused in Israel. And I hope and I pray that God will visit them with dreams and that they'll see miracles and that God will remove the veil from their eyes and they'll see him, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they will see Messiah and will turn back to him. That's the biggest victory that can come out of it. I believe that in the next 2 weeks, your government will be attacked. Everybody that will stand with Israel will be attacked. I believe in 2-3 weeks, we'll see many more demonstrations against Israel around the world. I think it's the time of the church not to be silent. Skip, I'm very sorry to say, there were some heroes in the Holocaust, Christian heroes in the Holocaust, like Corrie ten Boom, which I personally knew. I stayed in her home, and many others. But in generally, the church, I said the church, I'm very careful,
Was silent. Yeah.
was silent. Let's not be silent this time. It
Good
might
word.
not be so popular to stand with Israel in the next 2 to 3 weeks, because the picture that the Palestinians are going to put in the air going to be very tough pictures, but we don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. We have to defend ourselves against a demonic power that wants to eliminate us.
Well, we stand with you. We do love
Thank
you,
you.
and we
Thank you,
thank
Skip. I
God
know.
for you and
I
for
know.
Israel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
God bless. And shalom to all of you.